You ever have someone try to erase you in a single sentence, like you're a typo they just caught too late? It was 2:02 in the afternoon. I remember because I wrote it down. 14:02. CEO removed operational authority. No performance review attached. My name is Merritt Calloway. I've run operations strategy for this company for almost 3 years. I built the consulting workflow they were now calling redundant. I swear I could feel the room lean away from me when he said it. Not physically, just socially. You know that shift. When people decide you're already gone, Graham smirked a little. Not cartoon villain stuff. Just satisfied. He thought this was decisive leadership. I kept writing. He said it was part of a strategic realignment. He said the consulting division needed leaner oversight. He said a lot of words that meant nothing. No one defended me. Not even the guy whose budget I saved last quarter. Honestly, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so clean. Too clean. If you're going to take someone down for performance, you build a file first. You create a trail. There wasn't one. He knew that. I knew that. HR was already waiting outside the glass doors. That part hit harder than his sentence. They'd scheduled this. Timed it. Coordinated. I closed my notebook slowly. I made eye contact with him. You'll receive formal documentation, he said, like he was doing me a favor. Sure. Here's the thing, though. Authority inside a company, it's layered administrative authority, budget authority, hiring authority. He had all of that. What he didn't think about, what he probably never had to think about, was ownership. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. That sound carried more than anything I could have said. As I walked toward the door, I glanced back once. Not dramatically, just to confirm something in my own head. He looked relaxed. HR smiled in that tight, professional way. Fast and clean. That's what this was going to be. They thought they had removed everything that mattered. They hadn't. Dana from HR was already standing when I walked out of the conference room. She didn't look at me like I was a failure. She looked at me like I was paperwork. We'll make this efficient. She said, of course. We sat in a smaller room that smelled like printer toner and lemon wipes. She slid the separation agreement toward me. Your role has been eliminated as part of restructuring. There's no misconduct. You'll receive 2 weeks of severance pay. That's it, I asked. It's compliant with Massachusetts employment law. Compliant. I almost admired the word choice. My laptop screen went black in the middle of me opening a file. Oh, she said softly. IT has already deactivated access. My badge stopped working before we even finished. I heard the tiny dead click when I tried it on the internal door. That sound sticks with you. You're not disputing this, are you? She asked. No, I said, I'm not disputing. That surprised her. I signed acknowledgement of receipt. Not the waiver page. I left that one blank. I'll need a full copy of my personnel file, I said. And the written restructuring rationale. Also confirmation that the board authorized the elimination. She paused at that. The board doesn't usually just send what exists. I said, calm, not hostile. She nodded slowly. You understand there's no grounds for legal action here? I understand. I said, and I did. They'd done this clean. No threats, no dirty language. Just surgical removal. At 4:17, I walked out into Post Office Square. Cold air, traffic humming, no ceremony. They thought I'd go home and polish my resume. I didn't open LinkedIn that night. Didn't update my resume. Didn't call anyone. I opened my LLC account. 0.47% total beneficial ownership. Not impressive, not headline worthy. But not nothing. 18 months ago, I set up automatic purchases. Every paycheck. Small amounts. Boring amounts. I told myself it was alignment. Skin in the game. If I was building systems worth millions in billable consulting revenue, I should own part of it. That felt adult. Now it felt strategic. I'd pulled up the company bylaws. I'd skimmed them before. Honestly, out of curiosity. Tonight I read every line. As a shareholder of record, I had statutory inspection rights regardless of the size of my stake. As long as my purpose was proper, 5% or 100 shareholders' ability to request an extraordinary meeting. I don't have 5%. I don't have a coalition. But I have enough to request records, board minutes, vendor approvals, compensation reports. Enough to read. I called my broker. Short call. Everything's still in the LLC, I asked. Yes, 4.47% total beneficial ownership. He said, you planning to sell? No. I said, not yet. You worried about the restructuring? I'm curious about it. He laughed lightly. Curiosity can get expensive, maybe, or profitable. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark a minute. He removed my authority. He didn't remove my ownership. I pulled the governance charter from the company's public investor relations portal, the one place Graham couldn't lock me out of. Section 4.7. Related party transactions exceeding $100,000 must be disclosed to the board. Any executive with a material relationship must formally declare it. Material. That word does a lot of heavy lifting. I read it 3 times. Then something clicked. Back Bay, December, company holiday reception. Too much white wine. Bad jazz band. Graham had his arm around a woman in a navy dress. Elena Voss, he'd said. She does strategic consulting. Smartest person in the room most nights. People laughed. At the time, it felt like flexing. Now it felt relevant. I opened my phone and searched her name. LinkedIn, Voss Strategic Advisory, quiet profile, limited posts. I checked the state corporate registry. She was listed as managing member Voss Family Trust. I had to dig through 3 layers of shelf filings to find the beneficiary, Elena Voss. I leaned back. Suspicion isn't proof. I know that. If I start accusing a chief executive of self-dealing without evidence, I don't just lose credibility. I risk being labeled unstable, or worse, defamatory. So I didn't accuse anyone. I drafted a formal inspection request instead, to Dana Whitlock, company secretary, subject shareholder inspection request pursuant to section 4.7. I kept it clean. No emotion. No mention of my termination. Signed Merritt Callaway shareholder, not former employee. If nothing improper happened, the documents will show that. If they don't, well, let's see who forgot what they were required to disclose. Dana replied in less than 48 hours. Subject line, inspection request confirmation. Merritt, she wrote, your request is valid under Massachusetts corporate statute and our bylaws. The company will provide responsive records within 15 business days. No warmth, no hesitation. I called her. You moved quickly? I said, I follow procedure. She replied, this isn't discretionary. Has Graham seen it? He has. Dana said. I lowered my voice. Dana, we both know if you withhold these records from a valid shareholder request, the board will see it as a breach of your fiduciary duty, not just his. Don't go down with his ship. Yes. Pause. And I asked. He expressed concern about the scope. Concern isn't a denial. No, she said evenly. It isn't. Later that afternoon, I heard from someone still inside. Not gossip, just fact. Graham had walked into Dana's office. We don't need to entertain this, he'd said. Dana's response was exactly what I expected. We are required to. That's the line. That's the shift. He can remove my authority in a room full of executives. He can realign divisions. He can cut budgets. He can't override statutory compliance. 2 days later, another email arrived. The board will review the proxy. Proxy? Interesting word choice? I called Dana again. Review how I asked. The board will assess the request and ensure responsive materials are provided. That's neutral language. It's deliberate language. I almost smiled. Are they assuming this is retaliation? I asked. The board doesn't assume. She said, it evaluates. That landed. They aren't on my side. They aren't on his either. They're on the side of fiduciary duty and exposure risk. If my suspicion is thin, they'll shut this down clean. If it's solid, they'll move. I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a second. The board reviewed the proxy. That phrase feels different than Graham denied my request. He doesn't control this room anymore. See Chapter 6, Meridian Strategy. The files arrived through encrypted email. 463 pages. I downloaded everything and made coffee I didn't drink. First section, consulting division, cost reduction initiative. Language I recognized. My language. Phrases I'd used in past strategy decks. Second section, executive compensation summary. Graham's quarterly bonus approved. Tied to operational efficiency targets achieved. The number wasn't obscene. It was structured, earned, technically. Then I saw it. Vendor approval log. Meridian Strategy Group, 6-month engagement, $180,000. Scope strategic advisory and operational optimization across consulting workflows. I leaned closer to the screen. Not identical to my old job description. Broader on paper, advisory, not managerial. Language is everything in these documents. I called Dana. Is the full contract included, I asked. Yes, she said. All board-approved vendor agreements within your requested period. Was this approved unanimously? Yes. Any related party disclosures attached? None filed? I ended the call and opened the Massachusetts Corporate Registry. Meridian Strategy Group. Managing member, Voss Family Trust. I had to dig through 3 layers of shell filings to find the beneficiary, Elena Voss. I sat back. My pulse was steady. Which surprised me. This could still be clean. She could have no financial tie to him beyond being engaged. Maybe the relationship was disclosed verbally. Maybe legal deemed it immaterial. Then I pulled up the metadata on the Meridian strategic decks. That was the ghost in the machine. The file properties showed the original templates were created 4 years ago by me. Graham wasn't just funneling money to his fiancée. He was selling the company its own intellectual property, rebranded with a new logo and a 300% markup. It was a closed loop of vanity and theft. He had hollowed out my department to create a vacuum that only Elena's firm could fill, using my own past efficiencies as the benchmark for her success. The audacity wasn't in the crime itself, but in the assumption that no one would ever look at the digital fingerprints. He thought the restructuring had buried the architect. He forgot that architects always keep the blueprints. I pulled up the conflict of interest disclosure log. 12 entries in the last year, not one from Graham. Then I opened the quarterly compliance certification, signed electronically by him. I confirm there are no undisclosed related party interests requiring board review. I read that sentence twice. That's not ambiguous language. That's affirmative certification. I called my friend Isaac, who works in governance advisory. If a chief executive fails to disclose a fiancé's firm receiving $180,000, is that material, I asked? Depends. He said, is there financial benefit she owns it? And she's using recycled internal IP to fulfill the contract, then yes. He said, that's not gray. That's exposure. Exposure. That's the word board sphere. This wasn't just a conflict of interest anymore. It was a kickback scheme disguised as consulting. Clever structuring, or perhaps. But even the best structure collapses when you pull the wrong brick. I built the timeline on my kitchen table like it was evidence in a trial I hadn't decided to start. Restructure approved. Quarterly bonus authorized. Meridian contract signed. Quarterly compliance filing submitted. No related party disclosure logged. I lined the dates up twice. Then a third time. You'd be surprised how easy it is to convince yourself you found something when you want to. I called Isaac again. Walk me through worst case. I said, if you're wrong, he replied. They label you disgruntled. They close ranks. They might even suggest reputational harm. Harm how you implied self-dealing. That's not light. I didn't like how steady his voice was. Later that afternoon, Dana called me. The board has begun preliminary review. She said, preliminary sounds cautious. It is, and the board may determine the relationship wasn't material under policy language. Material, that word again. So they could say it's perception, not violation. Yes, that was the first moment I felt something close to doubt. Not about the documents, about interpretation. If they decide Meridian's scope was broader, if they argue engagement status isn't financial dependency, if legal frames it as oversight instead of omission, then I'm not a whistleblower. I'm a former employee reading motives into paperwork. I added one more page to the packet. Deliverables comparison. My old operational responsibilities mapped against Meridian's advisory scope. 80% overlap. Line by line. I attached everything. No adjectives. No accusations. Subject line, shareholder governance concern. I sat there for a second before hitting send. You ever realize you're crossing a line that can't be uncrossed because once this lands in the board's inbox, it's not a curiosity anymore. It's a test. And if they fail it, I'm the one exposed. The board met me in a conference room 3 floors above where I used to work. Same building, different floor. Smelled faintly like dry erase marker and stale carpet. Present were 4 people. Arthur Kincaid, board chair, former governance professor, calm eyes, no wasted words. Outside counsel, Rebecca Lynn, sharp, measured, Dana, of course, and me. No, Graham. Arthur opened the meeting. We reviewed your inspection demand and the associated governance concerns. That word again. Reviewed. Rebecca leaned forward. Before we proceed, I need to ask directly, is this retaliation? No, I said, I'm not seeking reinstatement. I'm protecting shareholder value. Rebecca didn't blink. You were terminated 2 weeks ago. I still own 0.47% of this company. Arthur folded his hands. Continue. Rebecca flipped through my packet. Conflict disclosures rely on executive self-reporting. The policy doesn't require investigation absent declared relationships. I understand, I said. And the Meridian contract scope is advisory. It's not identical to your prior role. Correct. I said, it's not identical. I reached into my folder and slid the quarterly compliance certification across the table. Signed by Graham Halberd. I confirm there are no undisclosed related party interests requiring board review. Rebecca read it twice. Arthur didn't move. I spoke carefully. If Meridian is owned by his fiancée, and if that engagement exceeds $100,000, and if no disclosure was filed, then the certification is inaccurate. Rebecca's jaw tightened slightly. Inaccurate doesn't necessarily imply intent. I didn't say it did. I replied. Silence sat between us, heavy but controlled. Arthur finally said, have you shared this with any other shareholders? No. Press no. Are you threatening escalation, number? Arthur leaned back. Your concern is governance exposure. Yes. Rebecca closed the file. We will verify independently. That's when I understood something clearly. They weren't defending me. They weren't defending him. They were defending the board from breach of fiduciary duty. Arthur stood. You will receive written notice of our findings. I nodded and gathered my folder. As I reached the door, Arthur added quietly, if independent verification confirms material omission, consequences will follow. And that wasn't a warning to me. The email came 4 days after the review meeting. Subject line, interim governance update. Dana's tone was neutral. The board has acknowledged the potential conflict and started a preliminary assessment internal review. That meant they hadn't dismissed it. 2 days later, I got a call from Rebecca. The chief executive maintains the Meridian contract was broader in scope than your former role. She said, I never claimed it was identical. I replied, he also states the relationship was personal, not financial. She owns the firm. That's his position. I heard hesitation in her voice. Small, but there. I forwarded the deliverables comparison again, line by line. My former operational oversight responsibilities next to Meridian's advisory objectives. 80% functional overlap. Same workflows, same optimization targets, different wording. Rebecca called back the next morning. We've engaged independent counsel. She said, good. I answered. That afternoon, another email. The board has determined a formal investigation is mandated. Mandated. That word carries the weight of a gavel. 3 days later, Dana called me directly. The chief executive has been placed on administrative leave pending completion of the investigation. I sat down slowly. Effective immediately, I asked, yes, no celebration, just confirmation. An independent audit firm was retained. Vendor approvals during the relevant period would be examined. Compliance certifications reevaluated. Graham issued a brief internal statement. I have acted at all times in the best interest of the company. Of course, 3 weeks later, the public filing appeared. He had resigned for personal reasons. No mention of Meridian. No reference to related party disclosure. No apology. Just transition language. Institutional correction? Quiet. Controlled. I stared at the filing longer than I meant to. This wasn't a takedown. It wasn't revenge. It was containment. And now I had to decide what that meant for me. The annual meeting was held at a hotel in the Seaport District. Same city, different room, different energy. I registered under Shareholder. No one flinched at my name. Arthur stood at the podium. We have implemented enhanced related party transaction oversight, he said. All executive vendor relationships now require mandatory third-party verification. Polite applause. He continued. An independent audit has concluded. Governance controls have been strengthened. No mention of Graham, no mention of Meridian. Just process improvements. After the meeting, Arthur approached me. You handled this professionally. He said, I handled it as an owner. I replied. He nodded once. That distinction matters. It does. 2 quarters later, the company announced that the governance outlook had stabilized, and institutional investors stopped their sell-off. A research note cited improved transparency and strengthened compliance mechanisms. The stock price rose 14% over that period. 14%. I still own my shares. I work in Cambridge now, at a data strategy firm that doesn't confuse authority with entitlement. My title is smaller. My voice is not. A former colleague texted me after the resignation. You really did that. No, I wrote back. The documents did. Here's what I learned. And I'm saying this to you directly if you ever find yourself pushed out clean and quiet. Don't waste energy screaming at the door that just closed. Read the bylaws, understand the structure. Figure out where the real leverage lives. Authority can be revoked in a meeting. Ownership survives it. I didn't win a job back. I didn't make a speech. I didn't get an apology. I kept my equity. I protected its value. I moved on. If you've ever felt erased by someone with a title, talk about it. Compare notes. Ask who actually holds power in the room. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can be is not loud, just informed. I received $50,000 in back pay. I rushed home 2 hours early to surprise my husband. When I walked in, I heard him planning my divorce. That part didn't happen all at once. It just feels that way now. Let me back up. My name is Joanne Caldwell. I'm 42 years old. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I used to run operations for a regional logistics company until they decided I was no longer a cultural fit. That's corporate language for we're cutting you loose and hoping you won't fight. I fought. 8 months of paperwork. 8 months of calls. 8 months of feeling like I was begging someone to admit I wasn't crazy. That Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in a coffee shop in the North Loop. The place smelled like burnt espresso and wet wool coats. My phone buzzed. Email from the Minnesota Department of Labor. Final determination. I opened it. $38,000 unpaid performance compensation, $7,000 in damages, $5,000 in accrued interest, total $50,000 in back pay. I just stared at the number in my banking app. $50,000? Not a bonus. Not a gift. Mine. Money they should have paid me before they walked me out. I didn't cry. Honestly, I felt tired more than anything. Tired and vindicated at the same time. If you've ever had your name dragged through a conference room, you know what that feels like. I thought about the mortgage on our place in Edina. Heating bills that spiked every winter. The months Garrett said, we'll figure it out, but didn't really look at the numbers. I left the cafe 2 hours early. I bought a bottle of Cabernet on Hennepin. Not fancy, but not cheap either. I wanted to walk in and say, we're going to be okay. I rehearsed it in the car like an idiot. When I stepped into the house, it was quiet except for Garrett's voice upstairs. He sounded calm, controlled. I heard my name. I moved closer to the staircase without meaning to. The wood creaked under my shoe. He didn't notice. If we file next week, he said, the 50 becomes leverage. I froze. I hadn't even told him about the money. I stood there with the bottle still in my hand, listening to my husband negotiate my future like it was a business contract. Garrett's voice was steady, calm in that boardroom tone he uses when he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. The balance hit today, he said. 50,000. It's in the joint access account we use for the mortgage. As long as it sits there until the snapshot, we're golden. Her account, not ours. I leaned against the wall so my knees wouldn't give out. The refinance review is Thursday, he continued. I just need liquidity verified. Once that's done, we file. Timing matters. A pause. Then softer. No, she doesn't know yet. That part hit different. I heard a woman's voice through the phone speaker. Low and professional. Not emotional. Just clinical. You're certain she won't move the funds before Thursday? Garrett gave a short laugh. She won't. She thinks we're rebuilding. Rebuilding. I looked down at the wine in my hand. I almost laughed too. Honestly, he added. And Sarah confirmed the bank won't question the reserve as long as it shows clean for 3 business days. Sarah. The name landed like a punch. Sarah Huxley, my former analyst. The one I defended during a compliance review. She works risk compliance now at a regional lending firm. I knew that. The woman on the phone spoke again. If you file next week, the 50 becomes leverage during asset division. Garrett's answer came fast. Exactly. Leverage. I hadn't even told him about the deposit. Then I remembered. The iPad in the kitchen drawer. The one we used for streaming. I logged into my bank app on it 2 years ago when my phone died. I never logged out. Push notifications, balance alerts. He didn't hack anything. He just watched. I'll send over the draft, the woman said. Good, Garrett replied. Once the restructure is approved, we move forward. I stepped back before the stair creaked again. I didn't drop the bottle. I didn't storm upstairs. I walked out of my own house like I'd left something in the car, yeah? Then I got in and drove. I stopped at a red light on Lyndale and pulled up my bank app again. The balance was still there. $50,000. Clean. Untouched. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I didn't drive far. I circled back once I saw Garrett's truck leave the driveway. I waited 2 blocks down like I was casing my own house. That part felt pathetic. Honestly, inside, everything looked normal. Same couch, same stupid throw blanket. I looked at the iPad. My instinct was to log out and change every password. But no, if I cut his access now, he'd panic and file for divorce before I could freeze the assets. I needed him to stay overconfident for 48 more hours. The bank app badge showed 1 notification. He'd opened it earlier. I could see the timestamp. Then I checked the email app. There it was. PDF attachment debt restructure proposal. Personal guarantee. I opened it. 2 years ago, Garrett had personally guaranteed $180,000 for his distribution startup. I knew he'd taken a loan. I didn't know he'd signed it personally. The document laid it out plain. Current balance, payment history, delinquency warnings. Refinancing terms required proof of $50,000 in liquid reserves. He didn't need my money transferred. He just needed it to sit there long enough to screenshot and submit. My throat felt tight. If the refinance went through before any divorce filing, the debt would stabilize. On paper, the business survives. During asset division, that could get messy. If the company's value changes because of that restructure, I could be dragged into arguments about shared benefit. I scrolled further. An email chain. From Sarah Huxley, subject timing. Please ensure all liquidity requirements are satisfied prior to the Thursday review. As discussed, once the account snapshot is certified in the portal. Our stability audit will be locked. My name was in the thread. Not copied. Referenced. Garrett replied. She won't move it. I'll handle it. I laughed once. It sounded wrong in the empty kitchen. This wasn't jealousy. Sarah worked risk compliance at the lending firm reviewing his loan. If Garrett stabilized, her department avoided a loss. This was alignment. Incentive. Clean and cold. I slid down against the cabinet and sat on the floor. I typed a message to him. How long have you known deleted it? Typed again. Did you ever plan to tell me deleted that too? My hands wouldn't stop shaking. How did I miss this? I muttered to no one. I stared at the PDF again. The refinance review was in 6 days. If I did nothing, He'd use my money to save his collapse. I met the attorney the next morning in a glass office tower downtown. Her name was Diane Keller, mid-50s. No nonsense. She skimmed the documents without small talk. You're telling me he intends to use your $50,000 as liquidity for a refinance, she asked. Yes, and he hasn't filed yet, no. She nodded once. Timing is everything. I slid the printed PDF across her desk. The refinance proposal, the personal guarantee for $180,000, the review date, then Sarah's email, then the screenshots showing the iPad access and the balance alert timestamp, then the bank transfers to Garrett's mother. $22,000 over 4 months. Diane leaned back. Back pay for wrongful termination can qualify as personal compensation under Minnesota law. That helps you. That helps, I repeated. Though my voice sounded flat, but, she continued, if he secures refinancing before you file, disentangling the financial narrative gets harder. He'll argue the business stability benefited the marriage. So what do? You file first, she answered. Petition for divorce and request a temporary restraining order. We freeze the use of marital funds for collateral. The court will want proof of imminent financial harm. I have 6 days. Then we move today. I stared at the stack of paper between us. You don't have time to be emotional, she added. I swallowed. I already did that part. She gave me a thin smile. Good. We started drafting. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying one name. Sarah Huxley. The next morning, I went back through old files. 2 years ago. Sarah worked under me during a compliance audit. Smart, but sloppy. I'd written her up for incomplete documentation. I'd also defended her when senior leadership wanted her gone. I opened LinkedIn. She'd transferred into banking compliance last year. Same regional lending firm reviewing Garrett's loan. I called an old colleague, Nate, who still works in risk. Do you know Sarah Huxley, I asked. Unfortunately, he replied. Why is she handling distressed accounts now? Yeah, why are you asking? Just answer me. She's part of the review committee on small business restructures. My stomach tightened. I forwarded him the email chain I'd found. Garrett's message. Sarah's response. You need to act before she moves the funds. Nate went quiet. That's not standard language. He finally said, that's strategic. Strategic for who? For whoever benefits if the loan doesn't tank. There it was. If Garrett stabilized the $180,000 debt, Sarah's division avoided reporting a loss. Her performance numbers stayed clean. This wasn't personal jealousy. This was alignment. Calculated. I closed the laptop slowly and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. The refinance review was in 5 days, and suddenly I wasn't just fighting my husband. Garrett made pasta that night. Garlic and red sauce. The smell hit before I even set my bag down. He moved around the kitchen like nothing had shifted. I was thinking. He began, not looking at me. If we stabilize the loan this week, we get breathing room. I poured water into a glass. Breathing room for what? For everything, he answered. The company, the house, us. He set plates down. His hands were steady. There are 14 employees depending on me, he went on. 14 families. If this refinance goes through, we can reset. Reset, I repeated. He leaned against the counter. You know how this works. Liquidity shows strength. Strength gets approval. And after that, I asked. After that, we rebuild. We're a team. The word team sat there between us. His phone lit up on the counter. Loan officer. Confirming liquidity documentation. He flipped it face down without picking it up. You gonna answer that, I asked. It can wait. We ate in silence for a minute. Fork against plate. His jaw tight. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Is this Joanne Caldwell, a man's voice asked. Yes, this is Daniel Mercer with North Star Lending. We're reviewing a refinance application tied to your household. We need to verify liquid reserves totaling $50,000. I glanced at Garrett. He stared at me like I was a witness in court. I'm familiar with the account. I lied, keeping my voice steady for the recorder. I'll review the final authorization documents you sent over and get back to you by Thursday. A pause. Understood. Mercer answered. We'll follow up tomorrow. I hung up. Garrett's voice dropped. Why would you say that? Because I haven't seen anything. I answered. It's procedural. He snapped. You're overreacting. I am. He stood up straighter. You think I'm trying to hurt you? I held his gaze. I think you're trying to save yourself. He ran a hand through his hair. This isn't about me. It's about survival. For who he didn't answer that. His phone buzzed again under the table. I saw the reflection in the oven glass. He typed quickly, "Need signature before Thursday. 4 days." He looked up and forced a smile. "We can talk through the paperwork tomorrow." "Sure." I said, "Let's talk tomorrow." He relaxed slightly. Thinking he'd regained control, I took another bite of pasta. It tasted like nothing. He wasn't gleeful. He wasn't plotting for fun. He was desperate. And desperate men justify everything. I sat there across from my husband and realized something clean and simple. If I signed, I legitimized his refinance. If I didn't, this marriage was already over. I finished my water and stood up. I'm tired. I told him. He nodded. Like that settled it. Upstairs. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The refinance review was in 4 days, and I was done being leverage. I didn't tell Garrett where I was going the next morning. Diane already had the paperwork drafted when I walked into her office. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I answered. "But let's do it anyway." She slid the petition across the desk. Divorce filing. My name first. Then the motion for temporary restraining order. "This asks the court to freeze use of marital funds for collateral," she explained. "We're attaching everything." I watched her organize it. The refinance proposal for $180,000. The email from Sarah advising him to move before I shifted the funds. Screenshots showing the iPad access to my bank alerts. Records of $22,000 transferred to his mother over 4 months. Diane looked at me over the stack. "This shows imminent financial harm." She said, "That's what we need. And if the judge doesn't see it that way, then we argue harder." I signed. My hand shook once. Just once. I hated that it did. Diane noticed. "You don't have to feel steady to act steady." "I'm not trying to feel anything right now," I replied. She nodded. "Good." We filed electronically before noon. Given the refinance review date, she added, "The court should respond within 48 hours. Should, that word stuck. Garrett had no idea. He probably thought I was at the grocery store or running errands. Maybe he thought I was reviewing paperwork like a good partner. By the time I stepped outside, the wind cut through my coat. I barely felt it. 3 days before the review meeting, if the temporary freeze didn't reach North Star Lending before Thursday, his plan would move forward anyway. I checked my phone. No calls yet. The waiting had started. Thursday morning came faster than I expected. Garrett had dressed early, button-down shirt, the one he wears when he needs to look credible. He paced the kitchen with his phone in his hand. "Reviews at 10, he muttered, more to himself than to me. I sat at the table with coffee I wasn't drinking. At 10:15, his phone rang. He answered on speaker without realizing. "Mr. Caldwell?" A man's voice began, steady and formal. "This is Daniel Mercer from North Star Lending. We've been notified of active domestic asset litigation connected to your household accounts." Garrett stiffened. "What does that mean?" "It means your application is suspended pending court clarification. We cannot proceed with the refinance at this time. That's not possible." Garrett snapped. "The liquidity is there, sir. There's a temporary restraining order preventing the use of marital funds as collateral." Silence. "I was not informed of that," Garrett said slowly. "It was filed 48 hours ago." He ended the call without another word. He turned to me. "You filed." "Yes, you destroyed everything," he said, voice low but shaking. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I protected myself. You could have talked to me." "I tried," I answered. "You were already negotiating." He ran a hand down his face. "That loan keeps 14 people employed. You tried to use my $50,000 to save $180,000 in debt. It's not that simple." "It wasn't simple when you called it leverage." He stared at me like he didn't recognize who I was. The refinance was dead. Without restructuring, his loan remained unstable. The committee wouldn't revisit it until the litigation resolved. He walked past me and up the stairs without another word. The house felt different after that, quieter, and the real fight hadn't even started yet. The hearing was short, too short for everything it represented. Garrett sat across from me, hands folded like he was trying to hold something together. The judge flipped through the filings. $50,000 in back pay. She read, compensation for wrongful termination. Diane stood. We argue it qualifies as personal compensation under Minnesota law. Garrett's attorney cleared his throat. It was received during the marriage. The judge didn't look impressed. Timing of receipt does not override nature of compensation. I felt something unclench inside me. Then came the transfers. $22,000 moved to a family member over 4 months. The judge noted. No disclosure during initial filings. Garrett shifted in his seat. That was temporary support. For whom the judge asked, he didn't answer that. Final ruling came steady and flat. The judge ruled the $50,000 as a personal injury award rather than marital wages, protecting it from the pool. And because the $22,000 secret transfers to his mother constituted marital waste, the business debt was assigned solely to Garrett as an offset. Marital assets divided equitably. No debt redistribution. Outside the courtroom, Garrett stopped walking. You could have helped me, he muttered. I didn't owe you my future, I replied. Later that week, I heard through Nate that Sarah's firm initiated an internal compliance review. Her expected promotion was suspended pending investigation. Garrett downsized within a month. Sold equipment, cut staff. No one went to jail, nothing exploded. Things just shifted, and I walked out lighter than I had in years. 6 months later, I signed my first independent consulting contract at a folding desk in a small glass-walled office in Uptown. The client, a regional food distributor, sat across from me flipping through the proposal. You're asking for $85,000 for 6 months. He said, yes, that's higher than we budgeted. Then adjust the budget. I replied, you're losing twice that in process inefficiency every quarter. He studied me for a second. You don't sound unsure. I'm not. He signed. Just like that. I walked out of that meeting feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not revenge, not triumph. Just steadiness. Garrett moved into a smaller rental in St. Louis Park. Sold the company vehicle. Downsized his staff. He still runs the business, just smaller now. We met once to finalize paperwork. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. I know, I answered. You just meant to save yourself. He nodded. That was the most honest we'd been in a long time. Here's what I learned. And I'm not saying this like a motivational poster. I'm saying it because I lived it. When someone calls your future leverage, believe them. Love doesn't excuse strategy. And silence isn't loyalty. Protect your name. Protect your numbers. Protect your sleep. If you've ever ignored a red flag because it was inconvenient, I get it. Drop a comment if this hits close to home. 6 months ago, I rushed home to surprise my husband with good news. Today, I'm the one walking into a glass office, and the only person I'm looking to surprise is the woman in the mirror. And honestly, I'm still deciding what I want to build next. You ever get erased in real time? Like not fired, not yelled at, just deleted. The ballroom smelled like hotel carpet and cheap champagne pretending to be expensive. I could hear forks hitting plates inside. Applause. That kind of polite applause that means bonuses are coming. I scanned my badge. Red. The security guy didn't even look embarrassed. Wait outside, your invitation isn't valid. For a second, I honestly thought it was a glitch. I've fixed bigger system failures in under 3 minutes. This A door lock, I'm on the internal list. I said, calm. Too calm. He checked a tablet, shrugged. List was updated this morning. Updated. That word. I swear corporate America hides murder inside soft verbs. Inside. On the big screen. I could see it from the hallway. Aegis Prime. Innovation Award. Jordan Pierce standing there. Smiling like he'd just invented gravity. 27. Clean haircut. Loud handshake. He caught my eye through the glass and did that awkward half wave, like we were teammates. Vincent Carlisle was near the stage. CEO, dark suit. Big donor energy. He saw me. I know he did. Our eyes locked for maybe 1 second. Then he turned away. No drama, no security escort. Just a quiet correction. My name is Elowen Harper. I am 44 years old. And apparently I don't belong in the room I helped build. I stepped to the side wall, away from the door. My hands weren't shaking, which surprised me. I opened my laptop on one of those marble side tables. The screen reflected the chandelier light weirdly. I already had the email drafted. Subject transition notice. I didn't write it tonight. I wrote it 3 weeks ago, after HR slid that addendum across the desk and told me stability matters at my age. You know what's funny? I wasn't even angry. Not yet. It was more like clarity. Like when you finally admit the relationship ended months ago, I hovered over the send button. Inside, they called Jordan's name. Applause again. Louder this time. I could still walk away. Go home. Sleep. Come back Monday like nothing happened. Instead, I listened to that applause and realized something simple. They already decided I wasn't in the room. I just hadn't decided what to do about it. I did not start at Navexis as a victim. I walked in with leverage. I just didn't realize it. 15 years ago, I had already published a freight distribution forecasting model at Northwestern. Boring title. Dense math. No marketing polish. But it worked. It predicted load shifts across Midwest rail corridors within a 2% variance. Professors cared. Companies didn't. Not yet. When Navexis recruited me, I remember sitting across from legal. They slid the employment contract over. I skimmed. Salary decent. Bonus structure predictable. No future inventions clause. No assignment of prior intellectual property. I asked. So my pre-existing research stays mine. The lawyer shrugged. The algorithm was published research. Navexis owns the specific code I wrote for them, but they don't own the math. Atlas is a ground-up rebuild using the same mathematical principles. Not a single line of their source code. Instead, I signed and got to work. Over the next decade, I built the predictive freight routing engine they still use, layer by layer. I calibrated volatility bands manually during winter surges. I stayed on calls at 2 a.m. when shipments froze in Iowa. I handled 8 enterprise accounts personally. Not because it was in my job description, because I liked knowing what broke and why. A few years back, Vincent called me into his office. We need innovation faces. He said, marketable energy. I said, you mean younger? He didn't deny it. Jordan showed up 6 months later, sharp, ambitious. He asked good questions. Yeah, honestly, I trained him, walked him through the architecture. He once told me, I don't get how you keep all of this straight. I said, I built it? That was not arrogance. It was fact. After the gala, I called Maribel from the hallway. Tell me again, I said. The original model is defensible. She didn't hesitate. It predates them. They never executed a reassignment. On paper, it's yours. On paper. So why did it feel like they owned the narrative and I owned nothing? A few months before the gala, Jordan stood at the front of the executive boardroom with a slide deck titled Aegis Prime. I was in the back, not presenting, observing. Clive introduced him like he'd discovered electricity. Jordan's been leading our next generation architecture. Clive said, cloud native, scalable, market ready. I watched the slides flip. It was my logic, my load balancing thresholds, my demand volatility modeling, wrapped in new graphics, brighter colors, cleaner fonts. Jordan caught my eye once and smiled. Not smug, excited. After the meeting, he came up to me. Did you see how the board reacted? He said, I think we finally made it accessible. Accessible? I repeated, yeah, your original framework was dense. Dense. That's what we call 15 years of iterative calibration. I didn't accuse him. I didn't say theft. Because technically, he hadn't stolen code. He'd repackaged structure. Clive passed me in the hallway later. We need to evolve. He said, your work laid the foundation. Jordan's taking it forward. Does he understand the manual calibration layer, I asked? Clive smiled. We're automating that. We weren't. So I stopped adjusting it. I didn't delete anything. I didn't sabotage parameters. I just stopped staying late to correct drift. I stopped nudging tolerance bands before major freight surges. I let the system run exactly as documented. 3 weeks later, during a Midwest cold snap, one of our largest manufacturing clients called. Our routing variance is widening. Their operations head said, we're seeing delays. Jordan looped me into the call. I don't see a structural issue. He said, voice tight, the model's within projected range. It's not. The client replied, we're losing time. Jordan muted and whispered, what am I missing? I didn't answer right away, because for the first time in years, it wasn't my job to correct what they didn't understand. HR didn't call it a warning. They called it alignment. I sat across from Denise Fowler in a glass office that smelled faintly like lemon cleaner. She slid a thin stack of paper toward me. We're updating intellectual property language. She said, standard modernization. I scanned it. All future innovations, whether developed during or outside business hours, belong exclusively to Novexus. I looked up. That wasn't in my original contract. Denise folded her hands. Things evolve. So do boundaries. I said. She didn't smile. At this stage in your career, stability matters. You've built something here. You don't want unnecessary disruption. There it was. Not a threat. A suggestion. I'm not signing this, I said. She leaned back. That may limit your upward trajectory. My trajectory seems pretty limited already. I replied. She didn't deny that either. After the meeting, I didn't storm out. I sent a follow-up email summarizing the conversation. Dates, language, their wording. No emotion. Then I called my attorney, Paul Henning, who operates out of a quiet office in River North. If I build something new, I asked, clean room, no internal code, no internal data. Am I exposed only if you solicit their clients improperly? He said, no direct recruitment, no inducement to breach contracts, and document everything. Could they sue anyway? They can always sue us. The question is whether they win. That sentence sat with me. Legal risk is not theoretical. It's time, money, reputation, stress. For the first time since the red badge, I hesitated. Was I fighting for principle or just reacting to humiliation? And if I walked out, could I do it without becoming the villain in the story they'd tell about me? We didn't build Atlas in a garage. We built it in Theo's condo with a folding table and a whiteboard that kept falling off the wall. Clean room or nothing, Paul had said. So we went clean room. Theo Lasker leaned back in his chair, fingers flying over a keyboard. We're not porting anything, he said. New architecture, new containers, different logic layers. Different enough, I asked. Different enough to survive a deposition, he replied. Maribel handled the money and the paper trail. She set up Atlas Vault LLC in Illinois. She tracked every hour of development. Version logs, timestamps, synthetic data sets only. I provided the logic specs and math proofs on a clean whiteboard. Theo wrote every line of code without ever seeing a Navexus repository. That's the firewall they can't breach. I don't need their dashboards. I said, I know the math. We worked nights. Not dramatic nights, just long ones. Takeout containers, cold coffee. Theo once laughed and said, you know, if this fails, I could have stayed comfortable, then go back. I told him. He didn't. I reached out carefully to 3 enterprise contacts. No pitches, just conversation. I'm exploring something new. I told one operations director, if I built a pilot that reduces your variance by 2%, would you test it? He paused. Our board will ask about litigation risk. I won't solicit breach. I said, you keep your current vendor. This is a parallel pilot. One major client declined outright. Our legal team won't approve it, she said. Too exposed. That one hurt. Helena Grange met us in Fulton Market. Sharp eyes. No nonsense. I don't invest in revenge projects. She said, bring me 2 paying pilots, then we talk term sheet. No guarantees I asked, no charity, she replied. After that meeting, I sat in my car longer than I should have. Maybe I was overestimating loyalty. Maybe clients cared about logos more than people. Theo tapped on the window. You're not selling code, he said. You're selling trust. 3 clients agreed to limited pilots. Not contracts, not security, just possibility. And I couldn't tell if that meant they believed in me or if they were just hedging their bets. Helena didn't smile once during due diligence. She sat across from us in a glass conference room, flipping through binders Maribel had prepared. I want chain of title on the original algorithm, she said. Maribel slid the document forward. Published pre-employment, no executed reassignment. Clean room logs attached. Helena nodded once. And client outreach. No solicitation, I said. Parallel pilots only. No contract breaches. She looked at Theo. Development timeline version tracked from day 1. He said, Separate servers. Synthetic data sets. You can audit the commits. Helena leaned back. If this turns into litigation, I don't protect you from stupidity. It's not stupidity. I said, it's separation. She studied me for a moment. 2 paying pilots convert to long-term contracts. She said, then I release capital. Miss that milestone, and this dies quietly. No dramatic handshake. Just terms. Meanwhile, at Navexis, I heard through someone still inside that internal audit flagged key person risk in a board memo. Vincent asked Clive, how exposed are we? Clive answered, she's replaceable. He meant it. That part almost made me laugh. The night of the gala, I walked in knowing something simple. The pilots weren't guaranteed. Helena's money wasn't guaranteed. My reputation wasn't guaranteed. I could press send and watch nothing happen. And if nothing shifted, then maybe I had misunderstood my own value the entire time. Vincent's voice carried through the ballroom doors. Innovation requires fresh leadership. Applause. Louder this time. Jordan walked to the stage like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. I stood in the hallway with my laptop open on that marble table. The champagne smell drifted out every time the door cracked. My name wasn't on the list. Fine. My email draft waited. Immediate resignation. Professional appreciation. Contact information for Atlas Vault. No accusations. No drama. Clean. I thought about the junior analysts on my team. The ones who still slacked me at midnight when something didn't add up. I thought about 15 years of staying quiet because I believed good work eventually speaks for itself. That was my stupid decision. I kept waiting for merit to defend me. Jordan's name echoed through the speakers. Clapping again. I typed one last line. Effective immediately. My finger hovered. 3 seconds, maybe 4. I could close the laptop, walk back in Monday, pretend none of this mattered. Instead, I pressed send. No fireworks. No sound. Just a small digital whoosh. The email left my outbox and entered their system. I closed the laptop, slipped it into my bag. Inside, they were still clapping. I walked past the security desk without looking at the guard. I barely made it to my car before my phone started vibrating. The dashboard glowed with the weight of 15 years of accumulated trust beginning to fracture. First call. Midwest Steel. LON. We just saw the resignation. Who's handling our continuity? Navexis still has full access. I said, my voice steady against the cold Chicago wind. Nothing's been disabled. That's not what I asked. He snapped. I don't care about the access. I care about the person who knows why the routing engine hates the Ohio corridor during a sleet storm. Is it Jordan? Because Jordan just told me to trust the automation. Second call. A food distribution client. Are we exposed? Eloan. No corporate PR, just the truth. You're under contract with Navexis. I answered. You're operational. Operational isn't optimized. She said, and hung up. Then the voicemail from the CFO. A tight, controlled panic. Then the email from legal clarification request regarding prior intellectual property. They weren't mourning me. They were measuring the size of the hole I'd left and checking if they could sue me for the shape of it. Finally. Vincent. I let it ring twice. What have you done? He demanded. I resigned. It's a standard employment, right? You destabilized the entire narrative. You chose the night of the Innovation Award. You chose to update the gate list at 10 a.m. Vincent, you chose the optics. I just chose the exit. Inside Navexis, the marketable energy was already failing. Jordan tried to recalibrate a high-volume freight surge for a manufacturing client pushing a $40 million shipment cycle. The model began to drift a non-linear variance caused by the sudden polar vortex moving across the plains. Jordan relied on the Aegis Prime automation he'd touted, but the automation was designed for static historical data, not the chaotic reality of labor shortages colliding with a sub-zero cold snap. My manual override layer, the dense math I'd calibrated for a decade, wasn't in the playbook. I hadn't sabotaged it. I just hadn't handed over the intuition required to tune it. He called Clive. It's within variance, Clive insisted. Staring at a dashboard he didn't know how to read without my summary. It's not. The client countered on the other line. Your system is routing trucks into closed mountain passes. We're pausing all routing until we review risk. Pause. That word moves markets. By the next morning, Navex's stock opened lower. By midday, it was down 8%, not a collapse, but a signal to every institutional investor that the innovation they just awarded was a hollow shell without its architect. Legal sent a pointed probe about IP overlap. Maribel responded within the hour with the clean room logs. We showed them the firewall atlas was built on the published mathematical theories I'd authored 15 years ago, the part they didn't own while the Navexis code remained untouched in their failing servers. We didn't flinch. Vincent called one last time that evening. You put us in a defensive posture. No, I replied, looking out at the city lights. My absence did. You thought you bought the engine. Vincent, you forgot you needed the driver who knows how the engine sounds when it's about to overheat. I sat in my kitchen, phone warm in my hand, and realized something. Jordan didn't lose his degree overnight. The architecture was still running, but they had lost the context. They didn't lose a program. They lost the person who knew which variable to nudge when the world stopped following the rules of the code. For the first time since I hit send, I realized the transition wasn't about who owned the math. It was about who understood the mess. 3 months passed. Not dramatic, just steady. 2 of the pilot clients signed full contracts with Atlas, multi-year agreements. Real revenue. 1 stayed hybrid, splitting workload between us and Navexis. That one felt like a reminder not to get arrogant. Helena called me from her office. You hit the milestone. She said, Series A releases next week. No revisions I asked. You delivered what you promised. She replied, that changes leverage. Navexis lost 3 enterprise accounts over 90 days. Not overnight, not in flames, just gradual exits labeled as strategic realignment. Vincent requested a meeting. We sat across from each other in a private conference room downtown. No shouting this time. We'll drop the IP probe and acquire Atlas as a strategic merger. 8 figures, structured as a settlement and a buyout. You get a payday, we get our stability back. You'd retain leadership, he added. We integrate the product. You integrate control, I corrected. We integrate stability. Atlas works because we question our own architecture. I said, inside Navexis. Questioning becomes political. He leaned forward. You're emotional. I'm structural. He didn't smile at that. You're risking fragmentation. He said, I'm avoiding suffocation. After the meeting, I checked my phone. A text from one of my former analysts. You could have warned us. That message landed harder than any acquisition offer. Because he wasn't wrong. Freedom feels clean when you're the one walking out. It feels different when someone else is left holding the fallout. Is it still freedom when someone else absorbs the shock of your departure? 18 months later, the cumulative loss of the top 3 enterprise accounts took its toll. Navexis's inability to stabilize their variance led to a fire sale acquisition by a competitor in Minneapolis. Clive pursued other opportunities. That's the phrase they used. Jordan wasn't fired. He was moved to back-end engineering, lower visibility, fewer microphones. I don't hate him. He believed the story they handed him. Atlas grew slower than headlines would suggest. 19 clients, not 50. Not a revolution. Just steady contracts and long calls about freight volatility at 6 in the morning. We built one rule into our handbook. The person who builds it presents it. At the Chicago Supply Chain Summit, they gave me the keynote slot a year ago. I would have been backstage, adjusting slides for someone else. I stepped up to the mic and said, they told me to wait outside because my invitation wasn't valid. I realized I didn't need their invitation. I needed a structure that didn't depend on being invited. The room didn't clap right away. They listened. Afterward, one of our junior engineers, Maya, caught up with me. Can I present next quarter? She asked. The optimization layer was mine. Yes, I said, and your name goes first. She blinked like she wasn't used to that answer. Later, Vincent sent one final message. You won. I didn't reply, because this was never about winning. It was about breathing without asking permission. If there's anything I learned, it's this: document your work, understand your contracts, and don't confuse loyalty with silence. Silence only protects the people benefiting from it. Talk about your value. Protect your value. And if a door turns red in your face, don't beg it to change color. Build something that doesn't need the door. I stepped outside into the cold Chicago air. It smelled like exhaust and lake wind. Not triumphant, just lighter.